John, Mr. Vice Chairman, Colorado Springs, you just went through it. I'd like to call the Arizona State Parks Board meeting for May 20th, 2021 to order. I believe that we have people on the telephone that we will ask for your names here in a little bit, but in the meantime, I would ask that Board Member Terry Palmberg, since she is here in person, in live, would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Terry. All right. So, I'd like to have membership roll call of the board. Here.
John Sutton.
Here.
Lisa Atkins. Here. Becky Finnan.
Here.
Debbie Johnson. Terry Palmer.
Here.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Lisa, I want to make sure we're hearing you okay. Can you just give us a few lines of Shakespeare for a minute?
No, but how about if I read you a few lines of the budget?
All right.
We happy few.
Thank you. You're loud and clear now. I appreciate that
Thanks.
very much. So we do have a quorum and we're ready to go. So with that in mind, I would like, where is my notes? On the mission statement, the agency is a mission-driven organization, and we'd like to, at the beginning of the meeting, just to be able to re-express our commitment to it. As board members, we are gathered today to be the stewards and the voice of the Arizona State Parks and its mission statement to manage and conserve Arizona's natural, cultural, and recreation resources for the benefit of the people both in our parks and through our partners. So with that in mind, agenda items, first of all, D1, the board will review and may consider action to approve the meeting minutes from April 15th, 2021. Is there any comments? Is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes of the April board meeting.
Board Member Buchanan has moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, just by acclamation, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion is approved. If there are any members on the phone that are here to just part of the public, not on any of the specific agenda items that are here representing, particularly as we go through the grants items, I just want to make sure that I don't miss you, and that if you do have a comment at the end of the meeting, there is a call to the public, and I'll ask for that, and I want you to introduce yourself and then just mention what item that you would like to be able to give us as far as information. We don't discuss it as a board, but we will then acknowledge it. So are there any members on the phone that are here just as members of the public, but not as on any of the agenda items?
Lisa Robertson, City of Show Low.
All right, thank you, Lisa. All right, thank you very much. All right, let's go to item D2, and I'm going to hand this item over to Vice Chair John Sefton to lead, since I will recuse myself as a potential conflict of interest with this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this item is the discussion and consideration of action to approve, modify, or deny funding and amendment to the budget for Arizona State Parks State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. We'll turn it over to presenter Mickey Rogers.
Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the board. In fiscal year 2020, the State Parks Board awarded State Parks and Trails $100,000 to develop the 2023 to 2027 State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation Plan. However, since the award, the final bids were received. Costs were higher than anticipated, and they had three options with the contractor, and the parks felt that using data collection that uses the least amount of weighting needed in the final data set and most inclusive, able to draw conclusions about underrepresented group is the option they chose. This increase will be funded totally with LWCF funds, and the match will come from park staff. The total cost will be $260,320. LWCF will be $130,160. State funds would be $100,000, and staff and volunteer match would be $30,160. This funding increase was recommended by staff and AORC. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and Don Collins is also here to answer any questions.
Mr. Buchanan?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Just a brief question. You said the costs were, I mean, it looks like they're about 30% higher. Is that due to COVID, or do we know why we had not a good forecast on costs?
So the data that we use to.
So the data that we used to estimate the costs, we had to estimate the cost for the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant back in December. So we had kind of reviewed some documents and had an idea of what we were wanting to do for the SCORP. And the project that we used to base those estimates on was the Boating Watercraft Survey. So in discussing and further looking at other options for the SCORP, we decided that this was really an opportunity for us. The Great American Outdoors Act had just passed. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is permanently authorized now. The amounts that are authorized are higher than they had been in the past. So we really wanted to approach this project a little differently and make it way more inclusive than it had been in the past. So we kind of, as we were envisioning what this project looked like, it took on a little bit bigger scope, and in trying to be more inclusive, we thought we could work with several contractors, not just the one that we had kind of originally anticipated that we would do everything in one contract. So we are having a much larger stakeholder engagement process than we have in years past. We're trying to get, as we've discussed at the last meeting, because I think you were going to provide some names for us to talk to, right? So we want to make sure mining is involved. We want to make sure agriculture is involved. We want to make sure state lands is involved. So that's going to be a much bigger process than in years past, and we're working with ASU on that piece of the contract. We are also working on data collection. We're making sure our data collection process is representative of the whole state, not only the state as a whole, but also underrepresented groups. So that's why we chose the third option of that. So because in our efforts to have a more inclusive process, that's how that budget increased a bit.
So I don't know if this is exactly a follow-up or a recommendation for
Yeah.
something to consider, but that is, if we ought to look hard at this and understand, okay, are we gonna get better effect with the more inclusive project or process? We ought to think about it before we execute, really, is what I'm getting towards. And if we're gonna get a better effect, then maybe that ought to be the way we approach it from here on out.
Correct. I think in years past, we have had to adapt our process to kind of the reality of the times, and there's an opportunity here to really do an excellent, far-reaching SCORP. And also, the NSORLO is looking at extending the amount of time that the SCORP is
Valid?
Yes, thank you, gosh. It's the small things. From 5 years to 10. So if they were to do that after this process has occurred, I feel like this SCORP would be a really good document to lead us into the next decade, actually, even. So yes, I would agree. This would become the model.
That's a great question. And I think that, from our experience and with the presentations through AORC, that that discussion of broadening the reach and extending the time as a potential really adds a level of value, and hence the increase in the cost. And because of the grant awards and the alignment of what seemed like multiple funding sources for the project, that this ends up being a better culmination, a better outreach, and by far a better result based upon the increased investment.
And also, I'm hoping it will, because more people will be involved, there will be, we will have an implementation plan, which will be, which we have not had as as clearly in the past. And so we'll have an implementation plan. We'll identify some actors to take those actions and move them into the future. So I do feel like this is going to be a kind of, thank you.
A comprehensive plan.
I should have drank more coffee, clearly. Any other questions for me?
Thank you, Don. Any
Okay,
other
thank you.
questions? Board members? All right, with that, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Vice Chair, I move to approve the amendment to the budget of the Arizona State Parks and Trails, project number 0400770, scores, to increase the award amount from $100,000 to $130,000.
And do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we have one abstain. Motion passes. And I will hand the gavel back to the chairman.
Thank you very much. Let's go to item D3, the discussion and consideration of action to approve, modify, or deny funding for the submitted 2021 Recreational Trails Program Trail Maintenance Grant application. And Mickey, you're still on board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The Arizona State Parks Trails Plan has maintaining existing trails as its #1 priority for the past several years. Arizona State Parks has set aside up to $150,000 in RTP funding for maintenance of existing non-motorized trails. A potential sponsor can apply for up to $50,000 per project if approved. They select one of 3 contracted pre-approved state park trail contractors to perform the work. They provide the 5.7% non-federal match, and once the project is complete and work approved by the sponsor, State Parks will pay the contractor directly. This work must be done within 1 year of receiving these funds. In this round, there was one project that was submitted, Arizona Trail Association for Passage 21 section of their trail. They're requesting $48,000 in funds and matching that with $3,201 of their funds. It's an 8-mile section of trail southeast of Sunflower. The project will install drainage, widen bench, install rock steps, and check steps. The trail crew will work in remote sections of the passage and focus on technical areas. Arizona Trail Association will use volunteers for routine maintenance on easily accessed sections of this trail. Arizona Trail Association completed an awarded trail maintenance grant in 2020 in less than 9 months. This project's shovel-ready and all documents are in place. Staff, ASCOT, and AORC recommend to fully fund this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mickey. And just for the record, I want to recognize Sean Redfield, I believe, is on the phone. If there's any questions, Sean would be able to answer as well. So thank you. Any thoughts, comments from the board? Member?
I have a question. Have they received grants in the past? Have we given maintenance grants to the Arizona Trail?
Yes, they received a grant last year and they completed it in 9 months.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? Hearing none. Sean, again, thank you for being on the call. Is there a motion to consider approval?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve funding for the 2021 trail maintenance programs as follows. The Arizona Trail Association Passage 21 maintenance in the amount of $48,000.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion or comments? Hearing none, let's have a roll call vote because it is an appropriation item. So Kelly, if you would call the roll call.
Gil Larson,
Yes.
John Sefton,
Yes.
Lisa Atkins,
Yes.
Joe Buchanan,
Aye.
Debbie Johnson, Terry Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, motion.
Thank you very much. Nancy, I maybe want to go back to John's item since I recused myself. Can we go back just to do a roll call vote rather than acclamation? Would that make a difference or not?
For an action item?
For the
that's
score
already-
item.
The score
That's
item.
all, for,
That I
that the
recused.
vote's already been taken? that
Yeah.
one? I don't know if it would have any
extension was
effect
noted.
once there's been a vote.
I think we're okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Make sure
just
we're
that
good.
the protocol that the record was.
I heard
It was-
4 ayes and one, I didn't hear an abstention.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, so, Mr. Chairman, that's why voice vote is always, or roll call is always easier, I think, for someone to hear it, but, since it's already happened, I don't know what effect it will
That's
have.
okay, I just wanted to be consistent, so
Okay.
we're all right.
Sorry to set that in the wrong direction.
You're only missing-
Moving things along.
That's it. Agenda item D4. Mickey, you're still up?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the Recreational Trails Program provides grant funding for construction and maintaining non-motorized trails and trailhead facilities. Each fiscal year, a minimum of 30% of appropriated funds must be used for non-motorized trails. In this round of funding, there were 6 projects that were submitted, and I'll go over these one at a time and stop if there are any questions on any specific project. The first project is Arizona Trail Association Passage 24 Temporal Gulch Project, requesting $149,990 to be matched with $45,660. Arizona Trail is going to use a contracted trail crew to construct 6.3 miles of new trails on the Coronado National Forest. The current trail includes several miles of trail on hazardous roads. This area has been identified as the highest priority for the entire 800-mile Arizona Trail. The funding will be used for a trail crew, for 2 steel gates, and for a signpost on one of the junctions. Arizona Trail Association received a grant for construction last year, and the grant was completed in less than 9 months. The project's shovel-ready, and ASCOT, staff, and AORC recommended fully funded. And I'd be happy to answer your questions on this project, and I believe Matt's on the phone also.
Yes, Matt Nielsen's on the phone, in case there are any questions.
So I just thought I rode this, or part of this trail the other day, and that's a picture, you can see Mount Wrightson in the background. Just, my own opinion, this is an exceptional quality. I mean, they've done a lot of great work here. The only pain for somebody on horseback is that most of the gates are what we would call Texas gates, or they're pull barbed wire gates. You got to dismount every time you're going to open a gate, as opposed to the steel gates. So my question for Matt is, are they going to replace any of those gates with regular steel gates, so you don't have to get off a horse to get them?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question. And yeah, actually part of the grant proposal that y'all are considering does include gates at every fence crossing, because our goal is to never have one of those wire gates or cowboy gates. One, for the reason you mentioned, there's issues with dismounting and remounting. We've also found that lots of users, if they're able to open them, don't have the torque or the technique to properly close them, which is why replacing all of those with steel gates is part of the overall trail plan.
Okay, well, my compliments on I rode several hours from Highway 83 toward Mount Wrightson. Didn't get to the end where it connects to the old section of trail, but everywhere I went, it's in perfect shape, so my compliments.
That is so great to hear. Thanks so much for getting out there and actually experiencing it. I think once you're on the ground, you have a much better sense of what the eventual goal is in terms of trail design and construction. So yeah, your experience is invaluable. And we're working on a trailhead nearby too on private land, so that way you don't have to park on the highway.
Matt, you're obviously not here, but the board member Buchanan has provided us with a snapshot of the trail that's up on our screen, and I assume that the head that's on the shot is your horse.
It is, one of them. That's Cochise.
That's Cochise.
Or as my granddaughter calls him, Goat Cheese.
Very good. Thank you, Matt. Any other questions on this item of the ATA Passage 4 project? Okay, moving on, Nikki.
The second project is with the Apache Junction, Silly Mountain Trail Improvements. They're requesting $82,000 in RTP funding and matching that with $5,820. This is a 200-acre park right off of Route 60. There are 3.5 miles of hiking trails, and it's heavily used, one of the heavily used parks in Apache Junction. It provides access to a 453-foot summit. It's easy to moderate trails for hikers, bikers, and equestrians. The trail also includes a small botanical walk. The grant is requesting funds to replace a current porta-john with an ADA vault toilet, to provide a ramada for shade, as currently there is none, and upgrade the fencing in the parking area to keep vehicles out of the park. This project is shovel-ready, and Ascot staff and AORC recommended to fully fund, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on that. And I believe Liz is on the phone also.
Yes, thank you. Any comments or questions from the board on the Apache Junction proposal? Liz, are you on the phone? Okay, I was just gonna ask the silly question.
The silly question.
Of why this is
What's
called
called Silly
Silly Mountain. I did not know this title, and I would hope someone could inform me of that creative name.
I'll get the answer, and I'll provide that with all the board.
Any other comments? Hearing none, let's go on to the next item with Kingman.
City of Kingman is asking for money for White Cliffs Phase 2 project. The board approved Kingman Phase 1 project in the same area, which constructed 1.26 miles of new trail at the White Cliffs Wagon Trail Park. Work also included a kiosk and panels that were funded with other funds. All the work was completed in 9 months. This is for Phase 2, and they're requesting $144,910 to be matched with $18,200. This will build 5 miles of new trail, create 6 loops, and also have 4 other trail connections. One of the questions that Ascot raised was the $32,577 of the cost per mile. This construction is a new trail with difficult access, and it'll take a crew 5 to 6 weeks to complete by hand, which is standard for that type of work. Staff visited the site once Phase 1 was completed, and there were a lot of public using the new trails. An archaeologist is currently surveying the trail system, and that survey will be available by the time the funding becomes available July 1st. The project has the support of the town, visitors, and many others, provided additional recreation opportunities and connecting downtown with uptown. Staff, AORC, and Ascot recommended to fully fund the project. And I believe Mike Mearsman's on the phone, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions, comments from the board? Hearing none, thank you, Mike, for being on the phone. We'll move on then to Scottsdale.
Scottsdale is requesting funds for the McDowell Sonoran Preserve to maintain some of the trails. They're requesting $47,300 and matched with $3,000. So this project is going to be used to maintain several miles of non-motorized diverse use trails located within Scottsdale's McDowell Sonoran Preserve. Work would include using a trail crew to install new drainage dips, improve the trail tread, and manage runoff. These trails are heavily used by the public, and this work will make the trails safer and more sustainable. It'll include work on 10 miles of existing trails, work with both hand tools and mechanized tools, and installation of one sign. This project is shovel-ready, and Scottsdale has done several projects in the past using RTP funding, and the work has been completed in 2 years or less. Staff, Ascot, and AORC recommend to fully fund this project, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on this.
Okay, very good. Questions, comments? Kelly Hayes, I know you're on the phone. Thank you very much for participating in this, listening to this item. Hearing none, let's move on to Sholo.
Shoto 88 Meadows Trail Phase 2. Phase 1 was to develop 2,000 feet of ADA trail along the Sholo Creek. The project also included 2 ADA fishing platforms funded with Game and Fish funds, and included a kiosk, and the town also put in a pavilion and an ADA restroom at the facility. The project was completed in less than a half a year. Phase 2 will be to extend the trail another 2,000 feet ADA trail, and once completed will provide nearly 2 miles of out and back asphalt trail that will accommodate wheelchairs and other mobility devices. There'll also be 5 new signs, 2 benches, and trash receptacle. This project is shovel-ready, and Jeff and I went there last week and visited the trail, and the parking lot was full. It's right off of 260, but it's a heavily used area, and it'll be a great addition to the community. So staff, Ascot, and AORC recommended to fully fund this project. and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And I believe Lisa is also on the line.
All right, thank you. Any comments, questions? We're always pleased, Lisa, to see ADA trail improvements in our operation, and it goes back to the earlier comment about trying to be as inclusive as we possibly can with our facilities. So this is, I know, well-deserved, and really looking forward to seeing the accessibility improvements with this trail, so thank you. And then
Thank you,
last but
Chairman.
not- Go ahead, Lisa.
No, I was just saying thank you. I do appreciate the feedback, and I will definitely let our crew know, who worked really hard on putting this phase one together. So thank you.
And we'll look forward to seeing, well, doing it ourselves, but also seeing pictures of how an ADA compliant trail compares to a non-ADA compliant trail, because it makes all the difference in the world for people who have mobility issues trying to go up and down. So Lisa, thank you very much. Let's move on to Sierra Vista.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sierra Vista Garden Canyon Wash Phase 2. So Phase 1 was a project approved by the board that created a paved parking area along the Garden Canyon Wash. The area accesses 4 miles of existing trails, and this project was completed in 9 months. Phase 2 is part of a master plan of several phases for the 148-acre park. Phase 2 will include 3,148 feet of ADA trail, a pad for future ramadas, and an outdoor education center. And they're looking for funds in the future to complete the project, including restrooms, ramadas, and an educational center. The area has already been surveyed. This project is shovel-ready, and staff and ASCOT and AORC recommend to fully fund. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on this project. And I believe Irene's on the line also.
Very good, thank you. Comments, questions, board members? Irene, thank you for being on the phone for this. That wraps up the non-motorized package of grant applications. So is there a considered motion to approve the funding?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve funding for the 2021 non-motorized grant applications as follows. Arizona Trail Association Passage 4 Temporal Gulch Reroute in the amount of $149,990. City of Apache Junction, Silly Mountain in the amount of $82,000. City of Kingman, White Cliffs Wagon Wheel Phase 2 in the amount of $144,910. City of Scottsdale, McDowell Sonoran Preserve Trail Maintenance in the amount of $47,300. City of Sholo, ADA Meadow Trail Phase 2 in the amount of $133,952. And the City of Sierra Vista Garden Canyon Wash Phase 2 in the amount of $150,000.
Thank you, Board Member Buchanan. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
The motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion by board members? Hearing none, let's have a roll call vote. Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Very good, thank you, and thank you for all the people that were on the call representing your items. So let's go now to item D5, the 2021 Recreational Trails Safety and Environment Grant Applications. Nikki, it's your show still.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Recreational Trails Program provides funds for motorized, non-motorized, and diverse projects. Up to 5% of apportioned funds can be used for safety and education grants as they relate to trails. A project sponsor can apply for up to $10,000 per grant and have a minimum and match of 5.7%. In this meeting, we've had 2 projects that were submitted requesting funds of $10,900. The first project, Verde Search and Rescue Posse, Bike Safety and Skills Training Grant, is requesting $900 in RTP funds to be matched with $80. This is a volunteer group that works with the Yavapai County Sheriff. They do search and rescue, and they found out that access is much more efficient for the first responders using bikes. The funding will provide training for these volunteers to make their trek more safer and efficient. This will be 2 days of training at the Sedona Mountain Bike Academy. And believe it or not, this one had the most questions from the ASCOT committee, the smallest grant. Yes. They want to know about the volunteers, how they choose them. So all the volunteers must pass an interview. They also must pass a fitness test with a 5 to 6 mile hike. They're required to have fingerprint and background checks. They must commit at least 50 hours of volunteer service and do at least 6 search and rescue callouts. Parks thought this was a great project, and Parks, ASCOT, and NOAA recommend to fully fund this project. And I believe Mike is on the phone if you have any questions related to this project.
Thank you, Mike, for being on the phone. We have a question here by Board Member Buchanan.
So just, I'm assuming that they have their own bikes, or does the organization provide bikes? Are they looking for funding down the road for cost of bicycles?
Mike,
This
are
is
you
Mike
there?
Harris here. Yes, all of the cyclists provide their own equipment, and that includes all of the renewable resources that they require. So bike maintenance as well as the bike are provided by the cyclists.
Okay, thanks.
True volunteerism. Any other comments or questions? So apparently, Mike, you weren't able to convince Mickey to round it up to 1,000. Is that the challenge here? Here, let's move on to the next item.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the final project, the Verde Valley cyclists are seeking funds for trailhead map replacement. They're requesting $10,000 in fund and match it with $4,291. The Red Rock Ranger District has 38 trailheads with informational kiosks that display valuable advice to trail users regarding location, route finding, elevation, safety, trail etiquette, and real-time updates and concerns. Since the maps were last updated approximately a decade ago, the Red Rock Ranger District non-motorized trail system has been extensively updated and enhanced with over 30 new rerouted trails, new trails, rendering the existing maps obsolete. Funding will be used to create new updated maps to replace the old outdated maps. A total of 50 maps will be created, 46 replacement on existing kiosks, and 4 to replace any maps that become unserviceable due to damage or vandalism. This project was recommended to be fully funded by ASCOT staff and AO, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, and I believe Kevin is on the phone also.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, for being on the phone. Any comments or questions? Board Member Palmer.
First, Mickey, if you would extend our appreciation to the ASCOT groups. I know they vet this stuff very well, and we appreciate them spending their time and energy doing that. My question is, you know, I'm looking to the changes that have come about in our world, and you look at restaurants and their menus now. You just scan your phone on it, and you got the whole menu and information. Are we going to move to, rather than hard maps at locations, or maps, so if changes are made or things happen, it's current? I know very few people who do much hiking without them. Just a question or a thought. Might not get service at all of them.
Go ahead, Board Member Buchanan.
I was gonna provide a counterpoint,
Okay.
if I may. So, given all my years in the Army, you know, about 40 years ago when I started, one of the key skills was to learn to navigate using a map and compass, terrain associate, and everything else. And what we find with a lot of young troops coming into the Army now is that they're very capable of using the GPS, but not so capable of understanding a topographic map. And it takes a lot of work. And the point is, you know, the person who's best able to handle emergencies or contingencies is not relying on a single tool, but can have access to many tools. So I don't disagree with, it'd be great to be able to have something that links to your phone, but I always want something in paper as well. When I go backpacking, I always have a hard copy. You know, just because you never can tell when the satellite's down, your battery's out, or something else.
So a point to that. My question then to this group is, are they topographic maps that you put out there?
Kevin, could you answer that question?
They're not topographic, but they do show they're not topographic maps like I would see, with in the military, with 1 to 2, 1 to 100,000, things like that. But they do show relief in there, so you'll see the hills and everything, and you will see the trails themselves. And we do get a lot of tourists here that don't stray more than about 3/4 of a mile from the trailhead, but they tend to gravitate at these kiosks and look at the maps, believe it or not. Because they're not really hikers or mountain bikers, they're just people coming off to wander around out and take pictures.
Very good, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Again, Kevin, thank you very much for being on the line. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve funding for the 2021 safety and environmental education applications?
Mr. Chair, I will move to approve the funding for the 2021 Safety and Environmental Education applications as follows. The Verde Search and Rescue Posse for the bike unit safety training in the amount of $900, and the Verde Valley Cyclist Coalition for trailhead map replacements in the amount of $10,000. Yes, $10,000.
Motion's on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Mike and Kevin for being on the call with us, and thank you, Mickey. All right, let's go on to
Thank you
item
for having me.
D6, fiscal year 2022 Arizona State Parks and Trails Strategic Plan. I believe Tim and Bonnie are going to be doing the presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman, and if the board is okay with it, I'll facilitate talk from here. That way it keeps the focus on you guys and not necessarily to the person up there who's staring down at you. So, I know Bob has spoke many times, and something we celebrate here is transparency and getting the board more involved in strategic decisions, discussions. I think we made some good strides last year on budget. We can continue to work with you guys, make sure you guys are involved in that. Our kind of next evolution is obviously get you involved in strategic planning. So the real question is why now? Well, we have to by law. State statutes say every year we have to submit a strategic plan. We've been doing that, but as Bob and I discussed, this great opportunity to start picking your guys' brains a little bit, really on kind of what the vision is. So the real why is, as we discussed, and this is a great group to use this analogy, is we know we're here today. We want to get to the top of a mountain, down to a beachhead. We want to go from here to there, current state to future state. What we want to do is just foster a discussion right now. What does that vision look like? We've got some slides that we'll go through, just kind of seed the discussion. But the real reason is we want to maximize our mission. Strategic plans help us do that. We want to engage the board to help us with that. We'll ultimately take this information back, look to operationalize it through different projects, different metrics. But we want to pick your brains to see what does there look like. How we're going to do that is exactly that. Many folks probably are doing strategic plan in your organizations now or have been through them. I think the empirical model is always just that. Where are we at today? Where do we want to go tomorrow? I've kind of learned the gap analysis. Okay, so how do we do that? We typically do that by fitting it with projects. So again, something we'll go back and look at. We'll continue to update you as we generate a strategic plan, but this will help us understand, okay, if we're going here, what do those projects look like? What do those performance measures need to look like to give us a healthy organization? Are we making strides to that? And then the how is real simple. Real big thank you to Nancy. She really helped us navigate this agenda item. We obviously want to respect open meeting laws. At the same time, we want to foster discussion. So we really appreciate talking with her because as we know with open meeting laws, if we don't agendize this correctly, we get into all kinds of a world of hurt. So today's really just to foster a discussion, and I'm going to constantly kind of keep looking to Nancy, and Nancy's not shy. She'll give us that kick under the table if we start to move into areas that kind of fall outside the agenda item. So what that really looks like is just obviously we won't be making any decisions, voting on anything today, since it's not agendized that way. But but that does allow us then to foster, I think, a pretty open discussion. But we'll constantly look to Nancy to make sure we're staying on the path. So that's a little bit of the logistics. The thing that too, in talking with Bob is we want to talk a little bit about opportunity thinking, these possibility thinking. With that, we want to be realistic. We have budgets, we have legislatures, we have current staff. At the same time, we don't want that to hinder your thinking, is that, well, if we can only do this because this is what we have today, these are the tools that we have today, are there opportunities to go gain additional funds, additional staff, or additional resources? But we have to be realistic about that, and I'll just make a silly analogy, is we're certainly not going to be making parks on Mars anytime soon, so in possibility thinking, we're not going to be jumping on with Elon Musk and SpaceX and setting up a park anytime soon there. But what are things that we could be doing that are somewhat aspirational, but somewhat realistic, given we have resource constraints just like anybody else. So those are kind of the two ditches on each side. Is that we take a bureaucratic way as well. We can never get from here to there because these are the resources constraining us. To the other side, which is this is just unrealistic to get us there. So those are kind of the rules of the field. But with that, we want to kind of point you to is if we could bounce back to that first slide. This is probably no surprise, and a really good thing for, I think, the country in Arizona is the demand for parks is going up. We saw that in spades during COVID, but we've seen that as we look at the trend over the last 10 years, is we are getting more and more people outside. And that's just a fantastic thing, I think, for all of us. I know we love the outdoors here as both staff and board members. It looks like the general public is trending with us. As you folks probably know, Arizona is the place to come. So we're getting a lot of Californians, a lot of New Yorkers moving here full time. And so across the nation, I think we're seeing this trend go up, but we definitely see it in Arizona, which means there's a lot more demand for our service across the country, or excuse me, across the state. And so there's a great opportunity, I think, for us to sit down and say, okay, given that, where do we want to go? Do we want to expand parks? Do we want to partner with other agencies like BLM, who I will tell you, having sent on a call with Bob, they're near begging for help when folks to show up in the open desert, kind of wildcat camping. It becomes a problem for the Forest Service. It becomes a problem for other federal agencies, and for us as well as we seek to see the resources parks get strained a little bit. So really perfect time for us to kind of sit down and say, how do we meet this need today? And like I say, pick your brains to kind of do that. Next slide, please. And so these are the strategic goals that came out of the strat plan. I believe it was from FY 17 to 22. So that we're at the end of that 5-year cycle. Here we just put them up here just to kind of let you know this is what we've kind of selected in the past. We can keep them, we can move on. We're not going to ask you to guys make a decision on that, certainly today, because it's not agendized that way, but just to kind of give you a sense of where we were. We kind of use the term as strat planning, start, stop, and continue projects. This helps us understand, are we doing projects that we need to continue today? Are the ones that are just, there's no there for them, we need to stop those? Or do we need to start projects, given some of the discussion here? But this, I think, will kind of help give you the past strategic plan, the past 5-year plan, strategic goals in terms of what's been out there in the past. And then, Kelly, if you can go to the last slide. And then just looking ahead, so the way the state works, there used to be a 5-year outlook, but what we're doing now is doing a single-year strat planning. Bonnie, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea now is that is a much more living document. So just because it's a year of FY22 plan, we can change, we can modify. In fact, I think it's encouraged that we do that. So just because we're using FY22, by no means does that mean we're locked into certain strategies, certain metrics, things that we're doing today. In fact, like I say, it's encouraged that we continuously look at this as a living document. Is it fitting our needs? Do we need to make changes? So I don't want us to be overly concerned that the things that we kind of discussed today, if you see pop up in the strat plan, we can always modify or change it as we need. So the big thing here I think you'll see highlighted is implementability. We want to make sure, again, that is, can we do this? And then measurable. As most folks know, is we just want to make sure we can look at a project, look at something and say, are we making progress? I think that's really key in, do we have obstacles in front of us? Are we moving at the momentum we need to move? So something to consider as we start the discussion. But with that, I think what we can do is kind of kick it off to you guys. I think what we would start with is we've got this huge demand for Arizona state parks or outdoor recreation across the state. We know we saw some infrastructure being strained during this time, wastewater treatment plants with all the people coming in, the new RVs. We are seeing that happen. Folks can't get into Slide Rock now if unless they show up at 6 o'clock in the morning, so we know there's high demand there. So with that, I'll just kind of open it up to the board. Your thoughts, what's the vision?
So, Mr. Chair, I have a couple of comments and questions. One is, I agree with going to a one-year strategic plan. It makes great sense. There's also great opportunity in being able to learn from what we're doing and then applying what we're learning every single year. So with that, I have a request, and this is probably will eventually translate into future action items, but that's to kind of look backwards. Okay, what did the strategic plan in the past for 2020 say, and what did we learn? Well, obviously none of us predicted a global pandemic. Okay, but how agile was the plan in enabling this organization to navigate that and look at it as an opportunity instead of just a series of obstacles? What did we learn from that, and how could we apply that to the future? Just as an example. But again, if we have a plan to assess ourselves and then make as part of the process, as we're leaning forward towards the next iteration of the planning, here's what we're learning from what we've just gone through and what we've done now. I think that'd be helpful for all of us and get us engaged. And then the second comment really has to do with a couple of your key goals. And I think they're great stratospheric goals, but when you bring them into real application of how do you balance some of these things, it's going to be situation dependent, and sometimes the scale is going to tip one way and sometimes it's the other. So here's the two broad goals: conservation of resources, conservation of natural resources, and access, right? And as you apply those to one park or trail, it's going to look very different than it will at another one. And because you're going to have a little bit different goals, but you'll want to always think about those two goals and make sure that we have the balance right. And so, and there's probably other ones there, but obviously if you make the park too open with too much access, you might lose on the conservation side. And if your conservation trends more towards complete preservation, well, we can preserve an area and just shut off complete access to it. So getting that balance right is going to be a tough challenge in every case. So what I would like to see is, how do we, instead of just the platitude, the broad goal, how do we apply that at each park to get these goals? Because it's going to look different for every park. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
Makes perfect
kind of a
sense.
translation into something that's operational. Thoughts?
One of the thoughts I had is, I'm interested in how are we going to move forward in securing additional resources or expanding some extra acreage adjacent to some of our existing facilities. We're getting overrun, and the population isn't going to stop in Arizona. So how our parks can't support this continued growth of use. We just don't have the space available.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to answer that one. You're right. It's right where we are. Increased population, increased visitation, I think is one of the key strategic goals that we need to talk about, and then chart that path. It may be acquire new parks. It may be expand new parks, or it could be no. We need to focus more on the conservation side of that resource, which then tells us as an agency, or me, as, okay, now if you want to expand parks, that kicks in a whole bunch of other thoughts in my head: revenue, staff, infrastructure, those kind of things to actually make that happen. But what if it becomes a strategy for you it becomes a priority operationally for me, and I then will do my best to translate that as it comes forward for you for approval for budgets, for these one-year strategic plans. Drive our budgets, and we know we've been trying to get you more involved in the budget, but you're seeing a budget without a strategic plan, or a strategic plan without a budget, then you're set up for failure. So that to us is if it's an expansion of the state park system, as far as land, then that's a whole another area that we would then talk about. Well, okay, this is then the board, this is what it's going to take for us to accomplish that. We may say, look, we're going to seek out donations of property, or maybe we're going to use our granting arm that Mickey's up every month talking to you about to start to influence expansion. Then you bring in our partners, cities, counties, the National Park Service, the public land agencies. All of that is really, it's such a really big topic that we're going to have that discussion, Terry. I think we've got to start to talk about what is it you all want, and what is it you see the future is, and then it's going to be my job to operationalize that, and like Tim said, not only what does success look like to you, but we're going to come back to you and we're going to report on this. What are we doing down there? Now, acquiring new land, we all know has complications. It's not impossible, but we haven't really done that in a while. The last park that we've acquired is well over Rocket River was the last, right? That's still not open. So those are the things to me is if you want to have expansion of parks, for example, new park lands, it's going to take a shift in where our budget and our resources are going to when it comes to staff and budgetary. I know you all know this, but I think that would be a great discussion to have, is where are we going and what do we want to be 5 years or 10 years from now?
My other concern is another interesting item, and that is the inventory of existing infrastructure
Yeah.
to see what is wearing out, so we don't end up in a situation where we're closing a park and the
Yeah.
bridge is falling down.
Exactly.
We really need to have that inventory, and Rocket River is another good example. When is that going to come on?
Yeah.
Some of the resources that we have, the ranch down
Yeah.
southern down, so what are we doing with those facilities that we have?
Yeah, and I do understand. I get those questions all of the time. What do you want to do, Bob? I need information. We are currently doing an assessment of every park, every property that we have right now to look at existing infrastructure, how old it is, what is code. Mark Weiss is leading that charge on the development side to bring that information forward to you, because is it $1 billion of backlog? Is it $500 million? Is it 10 billion? Those are the things that brings I think a point for you all to discuss is, do we want to focus on what we have, or do we want to focus on new, or do we want to do a little bit of blend of both? And that's why you all get paid the big bucks, but we have to be good at bringing you that information for you to make a well-informed decision. So we're on that right now. Rock and River is, we're waiting for the budget to go through. If the budget goes through and we got the money there, then that park is going to open very, very soon. I guarantee you.
And I think that infrastructure inventory situation also works with cultivating a high-performing and engaged workforce.
That's
Those two go hand in hand.
Absolutely. We cannot do this without staff. And staff is what makes this run. They're peanut butter and jelly. You got to have the money and you got to have the staff. But some of the real, as we go forward with which we want to engage you all more, is making those capital level, budget level decisions. That if we're going to invest in a wastewater treatment plant, that is a significant investment of resources. So that is saying expand, allow more to come in, versus trying to do these really one-off. If we want to keep San Rafael the way San Rafael is right now, that's a very low maintenance, very low staff commitment. But I think as we're getting better as an agency coming forward with capital requests or grant level projects, I don't want to come to you for a wastewater treatment at San Rafael, and then it sits there. And we need to put invest our resources as investments in the future, not as necessarily as just trying to maintain because that's what we always do or that's what the public thinks we want. Those are strategic level decisions that if we're going to invest millions of dollars in a park, it had better have outcomes that you all have agreed to versus we're sitting here. I think that goes for grants as well. You know, as you guys are approving, ASCOT's approving, and the AORC is approving those grants, what are those really going to? Are we the biggest bang for our buck? Now, they're individually great projects, but we could do 1,000 random acts of kindness out there in the landscape, but we never really achieve that objective. And what is that objective? And I think this board is in the perfect position to lead that objective on a statewide basis, my view.
So what's the next step? I mean, if I understand what you're suggesting and having this dialogue, I think would be great. But what's the right timing? This is not something you can knock out in 30 minutes. So either we have to have something aside from board meetings, or we have a board meeting that is completely captured with this and maybe even expanded. But it's got to fit in line with your timeline that you have for planning.
Yeah.
So I'd like to kind of know what you think about that.
Well, I was just reached in Tim's ear and mentioned the same thing, and that's what we wanted to talk with you about. This needs to be, you need to have the data and information. We need to have a place where we can have a long sort of discussion, facilitated discussion. Bonnie's sitting back there taking copious notes because what we would propose to you is this as a retreat style format, that maybe this is a day and a half, if we can swing it, that we can really get into some of these discussions and not rush. That's why we're here today. I think it's perfect timing for us that allows that nice lengthy discussion as a retreat and then back in an open meeting style format. But we're open to whatever you all think is right and is appropriate to further these discussions. So we'd love your feedback.
Well, and I think just to, you know, get back to Terry in a second, but what Jeff is mentioning with this sort of retreat format that you said, Bob, my concern is that here we are down here in Maricopa County, doesn't have a state park, but this is where the decisions are made by our board. That's not transparent. I mean, that doesn't give us the opportunity to be statewide in our effort to really get commentary and to be able to get input from our stakeholders, our participants. I know the SCORP plan is going to try to engage in that more, but I think from our board point of view, we need to be on the road. We need to be able to go out, and we need to engage your populations that are out in these various areas to bring in their commentary so that they feel like they're a part of this. And the fact that you're doing this annually now gives us a better opportunity year after year after year to go into these different areas and bring them in. Because the last thing someone who's living up in one of the rural areas or near one of the tribal nations want to know is that, oh yeah, the state parks board down there in good old Maricopa County decided to approve a strategic plan that we knew nothing about on it. So I would just encourage that I think our board needs to have that kind of flexibility and that adoption, and particularly post-pandemic where we presumably can get out and have these, not as a formal business, but as an opportunity to hear and listen, kind of like a public hearing sort of arrangement. Terry? You have a-
Jeff, you're new to the board, but in 2018, we went through an extensive master planning process and look, and we've still got those documents. Have we reviewed those or evaluated those? And maybe that's one of the things we need to look at. What did we accomplish on that list of items, and where are we, and how do those dovetail into the future ones? And it's not easy to plan one year when you're already planning for the next year, and year-to-year planning is very difficult. That's why many have gone into at least a 2-year budget cycle. Otherwise, you're just in the throes of planning continually.
So Chairman, if I may, I can actually answer that. That's what actually brought us, I think, here today. We took a look at that strat plan. I think to Board Member Buchanan's statement, it was complicated. It was well thought out, had a lot of detail in there, got way into the weeds, but it was tough to implement. It went from strategy to tactical, so that's why we wanted to kind of raise this issue up there. So we've actually always been strat planning on a yearly basis. They have a 5-year horizon, but it's done yearly. Folks may not have known that, and I think that was what Bob and I wanted to bring today, is this was going on. There's a strat plan out there that the board may or may not be aware of. We didn't think that was appropriate. As we started to get more transparent and bring you guys in, unfortunately, this is not a new process. Engaging the board, I think, every single year, that's going to be the new process. And then I really appreciated what Member Buchanan said does this learn anything from that plan? Is it fluid? Is it adjustable? I think it was a fantastic plan. So I know Board Member Palmer, you were on that, so I don't want to certainly insult that effort, because I think it was a deep effort. I think there was deep thinking there. But when you uncover that strat plan, it's thick, it's big. It's really hard to develop fluid strategies and even tactical implementation out of something like that. So that's what I think we're seeding the discussion today. We want to have that retreat for that deep thinking again. But the document that we ultimately want to produce is something that is implementable, it is measurable, still has that same thinking baked into it, but not with maybe that level of complexity. Because I think when we took a look at that, it was highly detailed. It was somebody knew what they were doing when they did that, but from a documentation standpoint, when we talk about an implementable plan, the fluid plan, that's where I think it fell down. I think when Bonnie and I were going through it, I was impressed. I was impressed in the details, impressed at how much was in there, but it was big. What we're trying to do at the state level, and this is really the state edicts, is get us to these one-pagers. Can you boil these thoughts down to something pretty simple? In fact, in some of these facilitations, they'll say a noun and a verb. They try to get it that simple. Just for that, it's much more implementable, but we're able to get that thinking baked to the point where the concept is simple. It's a big ticket item, but you've really kind of boiled it down to its essence. So that's what we're going to bring that into, is it's something we have been doing. We didn't want folks to go online and say, oh, here's another strat plan. We weren't involved in this, so.
Because State Land Commissioner Lisa Atkins is on the phone, and obviously statutorily, these commissioners is on our State Parks Board, and I know that she also has a strategic plan, a relationship. So Lisa, did you have any thoughts on the relationship of state lands and the strategic plan to make sure that it's captured in this conversation?
Well, I think we're a customer, so to speak. We're a partner. We're a customer. I think we have a relationship established where where the grant that you all approved for the land department shows the potential of partnerships among state agencies, all being done on behalf of the residents of the state. How we are interagency or agency-wide managing assets that belong to everyone in the state, and have found avenues to continue to partner, because we're leveraging assets in that case that serve the same public. We serve the same public, that our purposes are different, but we serve the same public at the land department as we do at state parks. So there's got to be a way to show that we recognize the potential of partnerships, not just, and we can spell them out, but yes, to have state land mentioned in the strategic plan, particularly after what I consider to be one of the hallmarks of the administration of this governor, is to find a way for parks and land to work together for the benefit of the beneficiaries and the public at large. I think it's something that should be celebrated, and more importantly, we should institutionalize among our two agencies and any others that are appropriate. We have ongoing relationships with DFFM when it comes to wildland urban areas and fire prevention. We obviously have a strong relationship with Game and Fish because of their activities. So when the public knows that they're not funding institutions that are siloed, but that there are institutions that work together, I think everybody wins.
Thank you, Lisa, appreciate that. John, well, I'm sorry, let me go to John and then back to you, John.
So really, as the conversation has gone along, it does take a lot more thought and energy to update any of these, and the practicality. I'm hearkening back to my long winter and summer tour to all the different parks, and the opportunity to connect with the staff out there, and the heart, the passion, the knowledge, and the vision that exists in the team that is so disparate, and they all have their different issues and concerns, from how we staff at the ranger level or how we staff at the law enforcement level, to the maintenance issues and the products and the backlog of things that are out there. And the strategic, to us to be successful, needs to be that comprehensive look. And is it a document that we do for the governor's office, or is it a document that we do for the people that really empty the trash and clean up after the customer? And that we are doing this in a way that puts resources in the right place. To Commissioner Atkins' statement about, we serve the same people, and it's those same people that are abusing our systems and abusing our staff, and all of that, that goes into the bailiwick of operations. So, there is the thick document that you talked about, and the detail that goes into that, and the time and the attention to every noun and verb that gets put together in an extensive document. If we can get to something that the entire staff understand, but then it comes back down to resources, and where do we put, what are the top priorities for those resources, and the key strategic goals. I can look through almost any of these nouns and verbs and draw right back down to how do we make a difference in a park. I mean, I think that's part of what your plan should be able to do. And where and how can we make it better? So it is part of that reflection on what we've seen historically, and what if our objective is to get it to a single page, then let's get it to a single page. But that's going to take a lot of brain power, and then a consensus amongst very different perspectives on a board right here. And what is our role versus what is your role as staff? I think some of that recognizing, and as we look to have an engaged board, what authorities do we have? I mean, that was a whole other project, right? What are the authorities and the cleanup of the statutes as it relates to our board, and what authorities do we have? And are we utilizing those resources and dispersing them appropriately throughout the state? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Jeff?
Sure. So first of all, my compliments to you. To paraphrase a quote from an old dead guy, the plan is nothing, but planning is everything. Okay, so this process that you're talking about, especially engaging us, I think is going to serve all of us well into the future. And, to paraphrase another thing, the plan is never going to survive first contact. The enemy gets a vote, all that. The plan is going to be ineffective. The plan itself is not going to be sufficient to handle all contingencies. But if we've gone through a good process of planning, we'll be able to take advantage of opportunities in the future. And Mr. Chair, I recommend you think about going to San Rafael Ranch. You talked about that. You can knock out two birds with one stone.
There you go.
For somebody who doesn't live in Maricopa County, that's a 9-mile drive instead of a 190-mile drive. So,
Okay, we'll have that on the agenda.
That's right, that's right.
No, I think to wrap this up, and I echo everything that the board members have said, this is timely, it's strategic, needs to be powerful. It isn't just this notion of verbiage. It needs to be something that can be actually acted upon and the like. So with that in mind, just a couple of closing comments. One is, please review the current Center for the Future of Arizona report that just came out in the last 2 weeks on the Arizona We Want. The highest ranked Gallup poll metric beyond anything else, health, education, safety. The highest metric was 92% of the citizens polled in Arizona want to preserve and protect our natural areas. I mean, that was just almost 100%. So if that's the vision, that our citizenry has, what role then does our state parks agency have to be able to commit to that? Second of all, and it was mentioned here earlier, lessons learned from this COVID-19 horrible pandemic. In fact, I'm authoring a publication that's going to be published soon. Nature doesn't close. We all know that. In spite of the pandemic, it never closed. Even when you close it, it doesn't close because people are out there, right? So what have we learned from this? Not so much from a preservation, protection, conservation forum, but from a disaster recovery, from an emergency management crisis. This is an operational issue of people that visited parks that hadn't been in our parks before. The trash, the trail usage, the overrun, the education, all of those things we have to learn from this disaster and put it into place. It's not unlike a wildfire or a hurricane or a tornado or a flooding. The drought right now, this insurmountable drought that we're continuing in, I don't know what the number of years are. I've heard it's as many as 20 plus years now that we're in. That affects our resources with that. So water quality, water capacity, all those areas have to be part of this environmental area. I'm almost off my soapbox. Last thing is on volunteers. And we heard in the earlier grants that Mickey produced, that wonderful opportunity of the volunteers that are running that huge $900 program. Volunteerism, you can't exist without it. And I agree so much with Vice Chair on the staffing, but without volunteers, we don't have the ability to really have that stewardship in our parks. And so whether or not we're able to measure that, be able to really broadcast that in terms of volunteerism in our parks, but stewardship has to be a critical goal. And what are those stewards doing for us that we can really amend? So yeah, we need to prioritize and designate an opportunity to really dive into this. And the fact that it's going to be annualized makes that even more critical. So thank you, Tim and Bonnie, and making this leadership. This has got to be on our agenda, whether it's emotionally or legally on our agenda every single month, because that's what we're here for.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Mr. Chair, if it's all right with you, I think what we can do as the next step is, if we're going to compile all of that data, you hit on, luckily, you hit on everything we've already been looking at, from capital, current conditions, future conditions, volunteerism, all of those other things that I think we can do is talk about setting up a retreat. If that's okay, I think San Rafael would be awesome. What we can then do is solicit dates. We're coming into the summer vacation series for a lot of you, well-deserved vacations, by the way. But I think we can do is find a couple days, maybe a block of 3 days, and then what we can then do is work from there. So we can have Kelly kind of sort of survey the board members and see what works, and then what we'll do is we'll go from there. And now we're going to go back. I think we all have a lot of really good information. Now I think we can compile all of our documentation to have that discussion. But I think you're right. I think having it in an outdoor setting, out of Phoenix, to facilitate this. I don't think we're going to, even after that retreat, really have all the answers, but I think it's going to allow us to continue to move in the direction that you want us to move. So if that's all right with you, we'll get right on it.
I think we have a consensus on that.
Okay.
And I might add, I don't want to get into the legislative update, but that resolution that we presume is going to be approved is sort of kind of a preamble to this entire conversation. So if the state does approve that resolution and it goes into effect, that certainly needs to be part of this.
Absolutely. You got it.
Any other closing comments? Hearing none, let's then go to the legislative update. I know Brittany is here, or do you have someone who's going to talk about it? Any of the items?
Hi, good morning. I'm on the phone. Can the board hear me?
Brittany, I'm sorry. Yeah, I would have introduced you before. Thank you. Take it away.
That's okay. That's okay. Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. For the record, Brittany Hudson, Parks Legislative Liaison. Thank you for just giving me the opportunity to speak this morning, even though I'm on the phone. I was hoping to get some better news this month, but unfortunately, we are currently still waiting for the budget bills to be introduced for this session. But the newest information from Monday of this week was that the executive leadership in the governor's office and the legislative leadership have agreed to a budget. And the members of each caucus were being briefed on the agreement this week, which is a really good sign. So we are moving a little bit closer to where we were last board meeting. So we should have a budget really soon. However, right now, I don't believe that either chamber has all the votes just yet to pass the budget. So that's what's being worked on right now. In the Senate, there must be 16 votes for the budget to pass. And in the House, there must be 31 votes for the budget to pass. So they're still working on votes. Once all of the votes are in, the budget bills will get drafted and be introduced in both the House and the Senate. And once the bill language is introduced, I will know exactly what is in the budget and what our agency will receive. And once that information comes out, the board will be updated as soon as I get that information. Currently, all the bills with money attached to them and also our HCR are still on hold at this time until budget negotiations are finalized. And once the budget starts moving, I will also be sending updates on those outstanding bills as well. So it's a quick update. I apologize for not having better news this time, but we are much closer to the finish line than we were before. And I am constantly checking and watching both House and Senate floor sessions, the Rules Committee, just to see if there are any announcements on the budget, but there haven't been just yet that I've heard. So as soon as I hear, I will definitely update the board. So I will open up the floor for any questions at this time, but that is the only update that I have currently.
Thank you, Brittany. Questions from the board? I think we're all sort of in a sense of optimism that things seem to be going in an appropriate direction. I know there can be surprises, but keep us informed on it. At least the newspapers are reporting that budget discussions are going on, trying to bring this session to a close here sooner than later on it. So I don't know, Bob, if you have anything further that you'd like to comment?
Yeah.
What Brittany said?
Thank you, Chairman and members. There's a lot of rumors going around, and until it is in the budget bill and it gets voted on, I'm cautiously optimistic, but you all know how the process goes. But I will tell you that this process this hasn't been a sit back and watch what happens. Brittany, as well as our CFO, Kevin Brock, and Tim and myself, and many, many others in the financial section have been working to find opportunities to make our agency a lot better in a lot of different areas. We worked real hard. The last couple of weeks have just been last minute because of these negotiations have been going on. So I really want to thank them. They really dropped everything to, when you have folks in the legislature that think about parks, and you take advantage of it, and we did, and we'll see if it's been beneficial or not. But the governor's office has been fantastic with us on what our needs are, what our strategic planning is, and where we're trying to go in the future. I think this is probably going to be one of the better budgets that we've ever seen in a long, long, long time. So that's my cautious optimism, but you're right. Thanks you, Brittany, for everything you're doing. She's monitoring 24/7. She's like a security guard agency on this budget. But
I'm trying.
she is, and so I would say, Mr. Chairman, that as soon as that budget's really released, we are ready to roll. We're going to dissect it out, and I think what we can then do is we'll make sure that with public notice of the agenda, we'll do a sort of a emergency board meeting just to let you know what this means, where we're going to go from here. So. Any day now, this thing could drop, but we're ready, and I think it'll be a good one. My prediction.
Very good, thank you. All right, let's go on now to item agenda E, future agenda items. Board members may identify items or issues they wish to be considered for inclusion on a future agenda. Board members? Board
Mr.
Member
Chair,
Plummer.
I have one. Third, we received communication from our executive director that indicated that we learned from our outside attorneys that the AG's office decided that no charges would be filed in the matter. Their office had been investigating for several years. And this relates to our past executive director, Black, and deputy director, Jim Keegan. When is this officially recognized and how is that done? I know that I've stayed in touch with the National Parks and Rec Association. There's a board out there pending, waiting information associated with any action taken. Now that it's been dropped, it should be over. But how does that information get conveyed? How are you conveying the information as it relates to existing staff that are still associated with this organization? So it's not a rumor mill that is addressing the concerns associated with this black cloud.
Mr. Chair and Member Baumberg, that's all we know at this point. We have reached out, Tim specifically has reached out to the AG's office. It's one thing to get a notice, it's over, but there's still a lot of things, loose ends that need to be tied up. We did notify staff. We did notify staff that the investigation is considered closed, but there's still a lot of things that need to happen formality-wise. We have reached out to the Attorney General's office. We thought we'd have some, not Nancy, not our attorneys. This is the criminal side, criminal division, to find out what does this mean. I would suggest, before I say anything more, that's all I know. And when we find out what this means, when we need to officially close this, what does that mean? How do we do that? How do we formally close this investigation and get back to normal? That's what we just don't know yet. But I would say for you, as soon as we know, I think it's probably an executive session discussion at first, and then what we can do is then come into the open session just in case. Yeah, I've never been through an agency that's had a criminal investigation like this before. So I just want to make sure that we're not getting out ahead of the AG's office, our attorneys, we reached out to them as well. So there's still a lot of things in the air. I wish I had more information for you. I don't.
So we'd like to have this on
Future exec session.
Exec session.
And,
Makes sense.
and as a part of the minutes
Yeah.
that are written up for next month.
Any other agenda items? Yes.
Not necessarily an agenda item, but just a question. I know that we're short a board member right now. I know that action's with the governor's office, and there's no telling how long that's going to take to sort out. But what I don't understand is, and maybe it's just a simple answer, how is there any problem with going on for a long time with 6 board members, with 5 board members? You know, when you have to have a quorum, is it the quorum of what we're authorized? So we have to have 4 people here? This is something I don't understand. So
Yeah, very good point. And yeah, let's put that on the agenda. I think that's a good point. It'd be a good discussion, and then we can have the Attorney General's office advise what constitutes the quorum if there's not 7 actual people on board and the like. So I would agree. And then just the idea of where are we in this tracking for a new appointee on the board.
Yep.
So I agree. We need to have a full capacity.
We had some vacancies on Ascot as well, I think, and so maybe all of them.
We could do, well,
All of those.
is Aorc fully fledged right now?
No, we're missing one. Just one.
So Aorc, Ascot, so yeah, let's do the entire group as an agenda item,
Okay.
as an update. That'd be good, thank you, appreciate that. Any other agenda items? All right, with that, let's go to the Executive Director's report on current events.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is a new item. I think both of our suggestions to let you know what's going on in the agency, at least as far as some of the big things. Wanted to remind the board, again, on June 30th is the celebration in Yarnell, and the entire board is invited, and they're all invited to Member Palmberg's house afterwards. She's got a really nice bed and breakfast up there, or before. But really great event. you're all invited. Let us know, as we get closer, let us know. We're gonna do caravans, and this goes for staff as well, caravan up. But if we do have a quorum, we're gonna have to notice it. Even at Member Palmberg's house, we have to notice that too, so.
What's
I
the
don't-
timing?
4:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah. So if you all want to meet, we'll meet here. We'll get an itinerary pegged out, but we'd be happy to give you all rides up. If you want to ride and save gas and have fun, sing songs on the way up, we'll make sure that we do that.
Not get lost.
Yeah, exactly. So the folks in Yarnell, I think as Member Palmberg knows, they're very proud of this. There is a lot of really neat things to say. So if you can make it work, let us know. We'll make it happen. We'll just give you a ride up if you choose to, but you don't have to, for sure. The second is, you all know, this office is moving. We're moving out of here in August. The target date for us to be downtown, 1110 West Washington, is where we're going to live. This office, anyway, the first floor. There's a lot of things that are going on that have to make that happen. We've kicked an agency out. They're moving up a floor, and then we're moving in, and there's a lot of infrastructure that's being planned. You'll have a brand new boardroom. Well, not brand new, but a different boardroom. Yeah.
It'll be brand new for us.
Very nice. So we're working through that right now. Floor plan for that has been approved. It's been modified to fit our needs, from everything from the front customer service to the boardroom to our office space, et cetera. But they're right now on target for an end of August move-in date. So I would imagine that our August meeting will be done here.
You'll have a retail area, I guess.
We will. Retail, absolutely.
And the banners will fit?
Banners are gonna fit somewhere. We're even taking that Caterpillar out front. We're moving that somewhere. That's going somewhere, I guarantee you. So that progressing on. As you know, moves are not easy on staff and other things. So we're really trying to make sure that we're staying in touch with what concerns are, things like that. But in the bigger picture, we are still on a very strong telecommute policy. I've told staff is don't really necessarily worry about whether you've got an office or a space or whatever. This is really your secondary, for most of us, our secondary workplace. So it doesn't need to be fancy. We're trying to do it on the cheap as well, but there's a lot in a move. If you had to move an agency before, this will be my third one. So it's never easy, no matter what you say. But the second, I guess the final thing that I wanted to bring up for you guys, and maybe I can ask Kelly to come over here and show this. To your points about COVID and outdoor recreation, our marketing department came up with a brilliant idea that as we were getting a lot of comments from the public on thank you, and the governor declared us as essential service well back in April of last year. We've been open. We thought it would be really cool as we start talking about strategic planning or true north sort of discussion, why we're here, what's important, if you were to boil it down to one thing. We solicited public comments on what parks meant to you, what state parks meant to you during COVID-19. If you want, you can hand it around, because some of the writing is very, very small. These are actual quotes from people. We received hundreds of submittals. And we did it like as a contest. We picked the top 3, and they won, and they're winning all kinds of really cool prizes. But we received a comment on every park. We received comment on almost all staff. That one is one of the greater culminations of those comments, and when we can get in, we're going to take that down to the governor's office, and hopefully he'll display it on the 10th floor, 9th floor. That's the top penthouse suite, about what this means. And it's not only just a thanks, but this changes the dynamic of parks and recreation. Parks and recreation, in talking to a lot of colleagues, and you all have work in that field, understand that parks is always the first thing to get caught and the last thing to fund. because it isn't a revenue generator, it isn't, you know, that infrastructure, we're always kind of last to the trough. When you talk about COVID-19 and we were open, to your point, nature did not close, this is what we got back. And these quotes are, you cannot, you know, you can't put a price on them. That we really provided a much more essential service than a lot of our other more important programs, but that I think was really neat. That's what I really wanted to share with you all, and let you take a look at that. And I think it makes us all proud of why we do what we do. But we also shared this with staff. Everybody in the agency got a chance. We even customized this to the park. When you got comments on your park, the park manager and all staff within that park got this thing. So when we sent this out on Employee Appreciation Day, I think the board saw what we had sent out. Everybody got that. And I think this is really one of the neater things that I've seen. In the pandemic, we didn't know what to expect. But this is a thank you to you as board members. This is a thank you to the agency and all the hardworking folks out there that stayed open during COVID. I'll let you know if there's an invite. It would probably be good to have a board member or two down to the governor's office with me. I'll let you know when we can get his schedule open, and we'll get that in there. So I thought that would be really neat to share with you that we're not just a place to visit. This is much deeper than that. This is the true north level discussion why we do what we do. So anyway, I thought that would be neat. Come up and take a look at it, whatever you want, or pictures, or whatever you feel. I'm going to see if maybe we can get copies for all you guys too, and you can display it wherever you want. So,
Thank you, Bob. And it's funny how like minds think alike. When Michelle sent out that note to all of us, and I just happened to make that same copy on the employee appreciation thing. This is messaging. This is storytelling.
Yep.
This is the information, and I think Board Member Buchanan said it earlier. This is an opportunity. This pandemic, if there can be a silver lining, I guess this would be one of them, to strengthen that message. And it just shouldn't be us. It needs to be the population at large. And it gives us an opportunity to really pat ourselves on the back and realize that Mother Nature is the ultimate healer in this state, and we recognize that. So good job to all of you, and congratulations to your staff, and congratulations for profiling all this into the various individual parts so that they see it.
That's right.
Excellent job. So
thanks.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Current events, let's go around the horn to see if there's any comments from board members as far as current. You saw the picture that Jeff brought us on the trail. Anything else at this point?
Mr. Chair, just a quick announcement. We have been in active engagement with the public on our expansion of Paloma Community Park, and imperative or important to state parks, as we have a number of grants. Trails, access to trails continues to be just the access to open space continues to be the public sentiment from our little part of the world, and it's pretty common. And with the Arizona We Want information, thinking forward, that just in line with what your thank yous are all about, our public continues. This isn't a new message. This is exactly the same message we did with our last master plan update 7 years ago. So this is something that is finally, it feels like it's hitting home, that our public wants it, people are willing to pay for it, that when our elected officials begin to understand how important it is to the general public, their voting contingent, then we start to see real action and change for our profession. So, thank you.
Thoughts, comments? Hearing no other events, this is called to the public. If we have any members of the public that would like to make a comment about an item that was not on the agenda, this would be your opportunity to introduce yourself and have that comment made. Hearing none. Future meeting dates, we have June 17th is the next board meeting at that particular time. I presume it'll be here, is the schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the staff had mentioned about the Yarnell Memorial celebration on June 30th. We'll put you that July, unless we have a special meeting relationship that you talked about, July will probably be not a regular meeting just because of the timing of it. And then we would presumably reconvene on August 19th at your new quarters in downtown Phoenix if everything goes well with your move, right? Any other thoughts?
He
or
might be
comments?
here.
Yeah, probably be here. Any other thoughts and comments? Hearing none, then we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody.